After the young woman was struck by an ability, she had to be hospitalized. Her brother monitored her condition, regretting everything that had happened, since he had hidden from her an ability that would have given her the chance to reach the skies. He told her that he had also awakened an ability, and now he could take other people's abilities. He was also evaluating her ability, which was ranked D but very special. He thought that if she had been stronger, she wouldn't have turned into an ice statue so quickly. While he was talking to his sister, he heard their father arguing at the reception. The lawyer was trying to explain to the father that heroes sometimes make mistakes, but Fei Fei's father didn't want to talk, let alone make a deal. The man was left speechless when he saw the father throw the document onto the floor. That was when the protagonist quickly picked up the document to analyze the proposal. He told his father that, given his sister's condition, they needed money. He noticed that his father hadn't considered the cost of the medications and other expenses. The protagonist wanted to add a few more conditions before signing the agreement. Hearing the mediator, he wanted to know what those conditions were. The protagonist wanted Bing Chuan-yang, the hero who had harmed his sister, to apologize. Quick as a fox, the lawyer said that he and the Kunlun company would apologize on behalf of the hero. He added that an A-rank hero's schedule was extremely busy. When the protagonist heard that they were willing to pay 100 kin compensation, he handed over the signed document. As he left the hospital, the negotiator informed him that everything had been settled for just 100k. The hero was pleased that lawyer Wang had managed to take care of everything with only 100k. After ending the call, the lawyer muttered to himself that heroes cheated. As the protagonist resumed talking to his sister, he asked her not to be upset that he had signed. He also said that some awakened individuals weren't qualified to be called heroes. To make his plans easier, he left his home, the Mingyu community. Upon arriving with his luggage, the protagonist encountered his new roommates. The two of them were very kind, introduced themselves, and asked for his name. The protagonist of this story is named Yang Exi, and he is a journalist intern. A blonde roommate wanted to celebrate such a pleasant moment. The other young woman, Xiao, thought it was a great idea. It could be before she went to the library. The newcomer declined as he was tired and wanted to rest a bit. As soon as he entered the room, he lay down on the bed and started browsing his phone. He analyzed footage of a battle between heroes and monsters, as it was very popular. There were also many videos explaining different abilities. He didn't understand how all of this had happened just because of a black hole that appeared out of nowhere. Now people with supernatural talents could be called heroes. There was a book called The Law of Abilities to prevent malicious hunters from misusing them. He found the video where his sister was injured by a hero. He watched the video multiple times but couldn't find anything suspicious. He was surprised by the time when he noticed it was already 2:30 a.m. He went to the bathroom, wanting to brush his teeth and take a shower. But he found something unusual ahead. One of his roommates seemed to have had a few drinks. She walked past him, and when he said hello, she didn't even look at him. She asked to use the bathroom first if he didn't mind. The girl felt a bit nauseous and had to use the bathroom first. She was in such bad shape that, after leaning over the toilet, she fell asleep right there. The protagonist, concerned, asked if she was okay, and if he should help her. He didn't want any misunderstandings, so he knocked on the other roommate's door, asking her to help. The young woman, still half asleep, asked why he wasn't in bed yet. He asked her to help their friend since it wouldn't be appropriate for him to do so. The girl said leaving her there wasn't a problem, as it wasn't the first time this had happened. After saying she had to work the next day, she simply closed the door. Returning to the bathroom, he asked the girl if she could stand up. He apologized in advance and lifted her in his arms. While doing so, he managed to detect an ability and realized she was an awakened one. The young woman's ability was ranked F, and he also noticed that she wasn't aware of it. But unfortunately, he was going to take that ability, and in the future, he would find a way to make it up to her. The ability Big Overclocking had already been successfully acquired. The protagonist now had two abilities in his possession, both mental, and he decided he would fuse them together. The fusion of abilities was completed, becoming a class ability of the superbrain. He thought that if he used that ability to analyze Fei Fei's video, he might find some clue. After that, he decided to sleep, but was alerted by someone knocking on his door. It was the young woman from the previous night returning his coat. He looked at her and could hardly believe she was the drunk girl from the night before. Since he had removed her powers, he wanted to know if she was in good health and comfortable. The young woman said that she was already used to it, and that he didn't need to worry. He said that was good, and while they were talking, someone entered. They were looking for the protagonist. It was a tall and burly young man. He was upset that the protagonist had hidden his relationship. He asked if he was dating and hadn't even told him. The protagonist asked the young man not to talk nonsense, saying that she was just his roommate. The chubby young man lamented that he had too much money and could afford an apartment all to himself. After that, he introduced himself to the young lady and said he was Yang's colleague. She returned the greeting and said her name was Lin. Peng didn't miss the opportunity and offered his abilities to the young woman. However, the protagonist said that his friend was only there so they could go to the newspaper together. Upon arriving at the Lukang newspaper, the protagonist began his analysis with his new abilities. There was a part that seemed strange to him, but he couldn't analyze it properly because his friend arrived right away. He asked why the protagonist hadn't made a move on such a beautiful girl. Running off, he said that if the protagonist didn't want her, he would definitely go for it. Yang said that they were just roommates and he didn't overthink things. The two were talking when suddenly someone screamed that there were monsters. Fan Peng immediately went to the window to see what was happening. It was a single-eyed jellyfish, and everyone there was terrified of the monster. It was announced that the monster was level B, and civilians were urged to take shelter. Quickly, the hero Sar Spicy appeared to save the city. He was a rank B hero, and everyone who saw him was pleased with his arrival. Everyone knew that the giant one-eyed jellyfish had strong defenses and a powerful counterattack. Fan Peng was talking to a friend without realizing that he had already fled. The young man who had the talent of taking pictures with just a glance thought he would shine once again. Another hero arrived, ranked C. It was Flame Butterfly, offering her help in capturing the monster. The other hero thanked the young woman for her offer. That monster hunt was being broadcast on the hero's channel. It was also going to be discussed by a pair of commentators. They thought the hero was inefficient because he needed to eat before activating his power. That gave time for other heroes to inflict major damage on the monster. The live broadcast would continue. The hero jumped at the monster, but he seemed to be at a great disadvantage. The heroine told him to dodge using his flames, like butterfly wings. She managed to inflict some damage on the monster using her flaming butterflies. The commentators believed that the monster's life was already low, nearing its end. There were differing opinions. Some thought the monsters were intelligent and were just pretending. The two heroes waited for the effect of the flame attack. After the fire was extinguished, the one-eyed jellyfish appeared almost unscathed. The young heroine saw that the monster had great resistance. They wondered if the hero would be able to hold the monster off until more heroes arrived. The hero remembered that he had been warned that he could not afford a single defeat. Otherwise, he would lose the top position in the company. The protagonist was secretly observing the two. He noticed when the hero put a strange pill in his mouth. The protagonist had never seen a blue pill like that anywhere before. Meanwhile, the flame butterfly had been caught by one of the jellyfish's tentacles. She pleaded with the other hero to save her life. In a live broadcast, there were many comments making it clear that no one had much faith in that hero. The monster was squeezing the young heroine tighter and tighter. She didn't want her end to come in its hands. She was rescued by her partner, the hero fighting alongside her. That turnaround gave an extra boost to his followers. The hero's supporters were pleased because they saw that he hadn't aged. It was no secret that the other commentator had little faith in him. The situation changed with every move. They were determined to show the battle of the hero Sar Spicy. The commentator said they would follow the fight until the very end, but the hero, after taking the pill, was different, and he charged at the monster with full force, attacking. His attack seemed powerful, but so did the monster's reaction. The pill seemed to have an adverse effect, which was why he started coughing uncontrollably. The young heroine could only see her companion crouched down and coughing. The veins on his face were bulging, which startled his companion as she approached. When she got closer, she asked what was happening, but he couldn't respond. When he finally managed to control everything, he smiled and said he had just used too much strength. The fans were shouting that this hero was very reliable. The protagonist thought it was over and needed to organize the news once he got back. However, when he looked at the jellyfish, he saw something else. It was a small clone of the jellyfish, looking around. It was heading toward the protagonist. He thought that since it had high physical strength, perhaps his mental strength would be enough. The jellyfish wanted revenge against that hero as soon as it found a host. Looking at the protagonist, it thought that young human male looked quite appetizing. Yang thought that since it had just fought, it must be weak, and it was good that his ability could handle the job. Luckily, his ability was enough to knock out the small beast. The young heroine noticed that someone was using abilities. He was lucky that it was just a small and weak clone, otherwise his ability wouldn't have been enough. He held it in his hands and decided he would keep its ability too. When configuring the ability core in his hands, he noticed it was a B-class ability. It was like an invisible shield covering the entire surface of the body, but he knew that no matter how strong an ability was, it would still have weaknesses. The young blazing butterfly wanted to know who was using abilities in that area. Yang hid, as it wasn't time for him to be discovered yet. When she touched the ground, she found it strange because she felt a surge of mental energy in that place. A masked person stepped out of the alley, asking if she was looking for him. She asked if he was the one who had used an ability just now. The masked person, wearing a cloak, replied that yes, he was the one who had used it. She wanted to know if he was also a hero because she thought she had seen him before. The man said he was just passing by and happened to help finish the job. The young woman was startled when she saw the clone of the monster that had just been eliminated. She thought that man must be strong for having taken down the monster so quickly, but she also knew he shouldn't have used power since he didn't have permission, as he wasn't a hero. He asked the young woman to let him pass. Her answer was a firm no. She held out her hand and said she couldn't do that. Since he had used powers illegally, he now had to follow her to the association. The protagonist started laughing at her and asked if she thought she could stop him. The young heroine, angry, ignited in flames and said he had violated the ability code. Pressing one of the heroine's flaming butterflies, he asked if this was how they treated humans. Now it was his turn to attack. She saw that things weren't looking good and quietly slipped away. After seeing a hero ingesting the blue pill, the protagonist understood what had happened to his sister. Taking off his mask, he realized that the ice hero had also taken a pill that day. Inside the subway, he thought he needed to take a break from using his ability for a few days. He needed to explore and understand the super brain ability. He also needed to consolidate the information he found about the blue medication. While thinking about this, he didn't notice that someone was taking his backpack. He reached to his side and realized someone had stolen it. Inside that backpack, he had stored the Raiden costume he had used in the alley. He suspected it might have been the guy who passed by him, but he didn't see where he went. He thought it could be a camouflage ability, and that the scent of the bag led to the man with purple hair. But his mannerisms and clothes were completely different. He figured it must have been an instant transformation, and a free ability like that would be very useful. The thief thought the day's reward was great, but suddenly he felt a terrifying aura and wondered why. Looking back, he saw Yang Lao and wondered when he had been discovered. He started running as fast as he could, complaining that this day had been awful. Quickly, he dashed into a public restroom ahead. Yang Lao followed him and told him to come out of hiding, but when he looked inside the restroom, there was no one there. He wondered if the man had gone into the women's restroom. Already inside the women's restroom, Yang Lao called out, saying he knew where he was hiding, but all he got in response was a scream. He quickly kicked the bathroom door open and entered, but as soon as he did, several objects were thrown at him. Covered in paper, he muttered that the man's ability was indeed impressive. It could even change his voice. Dressed as a woman, the man with purple hair said he was giving up and would return the backpack. Yang Lao said it was a shame he couldn't change his appearance. Signed, the man agreed with Yang Lao, and he hurried to return the backpack. Handing over the backpack, he said he was giving everything back. Yang Lao looked inside and saw that his clothes were still there. He asked the man if he had seen what was inside, to which the man quickly replied that he hadn't. Believing him, Yang Lao told him to find a job and become a good person. The man said he would never steal again and thanked him for letting him go. But Yang Lao responded that he never said he would let him go. In deep shock, the man could only tremble. After taking the man's ability, Yang Lao said he couldn't resist these chances to get free abilities. He changed into a black suit and headed out of the bathroom. Upon leaving, he encountered police officers who asked if he had heard anything inside. Yang Lao replied that he had, and that he saw a strange woman in the bathroom. Seeing the police take away the man dressed as a woman, he commented that some people didn't deserve to have powers. 1 week later, a taxi stopped in front of a club. Yang Lao stepped out of the taxi, having come to meet his friend. When they met, he asked why he had called him to that place. His friend asked him to guess who he had found at the club. Yang Lao asked who, and his friend quickly replied that it was Yang Lao's girlfriend and that she was working as a pole dancer. Yang Lao said she wasn't his girlfriend, but his friend told him to stop pretending, and together they entered the club. Once inside, his friend showed him what he had discovered. His roommate was inside a cage performing. Her performances were remarkable. The young woman's face saddened when she saw her roommate. However, the two of them passed by without looking at her at any moment. Fan Peng said that tonight, the bill was on him, so Yang Lao should enjoy himself. He called over some girls to join them for fun. 3 girls came, and he introduced them to Yang Lao. Fan Peng also introduced his friend to the girls. Soon, all the girls approached Yang Lao, but he didn't seem very happy. In the booth next to them, a man told another that if it weren't for his brother, he wouldn't have lost the race. Lei Hu said it was just a race and that he shouldn't blame others. Instead of getting upset, the man laughed. Liu Yuan said that he couldn't be on his father's side while also working as his bodyguard. He asked Liu Hu if he couldn't even speak, but Liu Hu replied that it must be hard for a normal person to be restrained by rank C. Liu Yuan, with anger in his eyes, looked at him, but he gave up and slapped his companion while asking what she was doing. He asked what kind of wine that was, and said he couldn't drink something so bad. After that, he grabbed the bottle and poured all the wine over his companion's head. Seeing the situation, Yang Lao wanted to step in, but he was warned that the man wasn't normal. Yang Lao said he knew, and that he was just going to the bathroom. On the floor, the companion sat, sad and soaked in wine. Liu Yuan said that in that club, she should know the rules and told her that if she drank all the wine there, he would let her go. One of his bodyguards helped her drink the wine, even though she didn't want to. Suddenly, he was kicked away by a masked man. Beside the man wearing a raven mask was the companion, lying on the floor. The man said he had heard that Liu Yuan was Jeek C's son. The rank C bodyguard asked who he was, and if he was just there to cause trouble. He replied that he only wanted to make a deal with Liu Yuan. Liu Yuan asked what kind of deal he wanted to make. Liu Hu said it was late and they should head back, but Liu Yuan didn't like that and threw a wine bottle at him. Enraged, the bodyguard glanced at him, but unconcerned, Liu Yuan asked the masked man if he wanted to do business with him. The bodyguard told Liu Yuan to sit down because he was too drunk, and added that he would handle it and take care of the masked man. The masked man asked if he wanted to fight and said he didn't like violence. Even so, someone was about to learn a lesson. The bodyguard wasn't willing to let it slide. Wrapping his hand in bandages, Liu Hu said he would show who was going to lose. He activated his ability, causing his hands to be covered in flames, and said that the masked man was unlucky. The masked man thought that his opponent had a C-rank fire element ability. The people around him believed he was bold for provoking a disciple of an A-rank hero. While still hearing the conversations in the background, the bodyguard rushed to attack the masked man. As he charged toward his target, he wondered why the masked man wasn't even dodging. Dodging at the last second, the masked man asked if that was all he had. But Liu Hu responded that since becoming a hunter, no one had ever endured his abilities. He launched a powerful burst of fire at the masked man. The spectators were in disbelief at everything that was happening. The masked man, already engulfed in flames, remained standing still, until he easily dispersed the fire, shocking Liu Hu, who then wondered if the masked man wasn't even slightly injured. But as soon as he stepped out of the fire, the masked man activated his mental blast ability, which left the bodyguard frozen and unconscious. The masked man struck the bodyguard's neck, who immediately collapsed unconscious on the ground. Liu Yuan, terrified, said that he was incredibly strong and had easily defeated his bodyguard. Activating his ability, the masked man took the ability of his defeated opponent. He then started walking toward Liu Yuan, who looked around and realized that the other bodyguards had already fled. Quickly, he asked what kind of deal he wanted and said that if it was about money, he would transfer it immediately. The masked man grabbed him by the neck, but Liu Yuan begged not to be eliminated and asked if he knew who his father was. The masked man made it clear that he didn't care who his father was. He said he didn't intend to eliminate him and asked if he wanted to know what the deal was about. He asked Liu Yuan if he wanted to have abilities. Liu Yuan, in shock, confirmed if they were really talking about abilities. The masked man released his neck, and he collapsed onto the ground. Already on the floor, Liu Yuan asked the masked man if he thought he was some kind of god who could grant whatever he wanted. The solution was simple. He just had to go to the location written on the paper in 7 days. After everything that happened, his friend called to make sure everything was going well. Yang Lao said that the club was too noisy, so he left. Fang Peng said he would explain what happened over a barbecue meal. His plan was progressing smoothly. Now he just needed to wait for Liu Yuan. At the Kunlun Hero Company, they were holding a meeting about the mysterious masked man. Jixi asked the others what they thought of the footage. Glacier Warrior responded that the masked man had defeated Liu Hu in seconds and said his ability must be B rank. Prodigal Swordsman questioned whether it was really an ability or if it had been a hidden blade that took down Liu Hu, and he pointed out that the moment the masked man raised his hand, Liu Hu had already lost. Demonic Dragon said they analyzed Liu Hu's injuries and asked them to take a look, but even he was surprised to learn that Liu Hu's ability had disappeared. Everyone else was also shocked by the information. Jixi said it looked like they had a major problem on their hands. The scared one wanted to know how the enemy was able to take someone else's abilities. The one with horns and red hair mentioned that the S-rank hero, Du Ren, had that kind of ability. The question was whether that person was doing the same thing. The blue-hair hero thought it was impossible, as that hero was already old, but the leader of the meeting believed they couldn't ignore the possibility. Meanwhile, the scared hero thought it was best not to report it yet, as it could be useful later. At the same time, the eldest among them thought that could be the company's secret weapon. At the luxurious mansion, the hero's son was thinking about the possibility of possessing abilities. However, he knew the man wanted something in return, but had no idea what it would be. Crushing the paper in his hand, he thought it wasn't a big deal. He believed that in a few days, he would have an ability, and nothing else would matter. At the museum, the protagonist invited his friend to go to the museum, using the excuse of learning more about monsters. The protagonist's chubby friend knew that, in reality, the women who visited the museum were beautiful. Trying to act serious, the protagonist said he was there to see the S-rank monster. He claimed he was gathering information for an article about the monster invasion. Looking at that monster, the chubby friend thought it looked incredibly powerful. However, the protagonist imagined that if he could steal that ability, it wouldn't be bad at all. Unlucky timing. Unfortunately for him, as he reached out to touch it, a police officer appeared. He quickly used the excuse that he was a reporter working on an article. The officer said he could let the item be looked at. It was allowed, but it couldn't be touched. The two were such good friends that they didn't need words. With just a look, the chubby one knew what to do. He distracted the officer with questions while his friend made contact, and when the protagonist managed to acquire another skill, he thought he could feel the skill because it took strength to obtain it. But once it was complete, he felt a great energy. However, he was shocked to see that it contained no information. Analyzing the skill, he noticed it was called plasma. He couldn't believe that such a powerful monster would have only weak abilities. He thought that maybe because the monster had been exposed for so long, it was gradually losing its strength. The protagonist believed that last time he was able to extract powers because the monster had just been defeated. He was frustrated, even though he was gaining a lot from the museum. Back home, he started analyzing the 3 skills he had obtained. Besides the plasma skill, he also had the control one. The power of the abilities had weakened to an extremely low level, but Prota, looking at the skill orbs, had an idea. He thought he could use the C-rank skill orbs to test something. The MC wanted to dismantle the abilities. He placed the orb in the palm of his hand to try and take it apart. After a while, there was a reaction. It began to crack. The message showed that the skill's downgrade was successfully completed. He now had a few black cubes on his desk. He concluded that it was dark energy and that perhaps the skills were formed from those tiny cubes. The young man began thinking that skills could be disconnected into low dark energy. If that was the case, he could use that dark energy to fuse and enhance the abilities. With that in mind, he started fusing one with a square of dark energy. The message showed the skill had been improved. Now it was an E-rank skill named Control, used to control other people. The protagonist was somewhat surprised. He figured he might even be able to create an S-rank skill someday. His thoughts were interrupted, as someone outside seemed to be having a serious problem. From the voice, it could be the friend who had gone looking for their roommate. The noise that suddenly bothered the protagonist came from outside. It was his roommate's father, accusing her of deceiving him. As the situation unfolded, the protagonist stepped out of his room to see what was happening. The friend's father said he had only helped her earn more money. The mother said the brother needed the money to buy a house, a car, and to find a wife. She felt used by her parents over an illness the father didn't even have. She just wanted them to stop. That situation made her deeply uncomfortable. She confessed that, in order to make the money quickly, she had to work day and night. The father, unconcerned, said it was all for the Lin family legacy. The young woman questioned her father, who said he would get the rest of the money by selling her to a stranger. The mother tried to calm the daughter, saying that the man, despite lacking education, had assets and values. When the man tried to touch the young woman, the mother said she wouldn't do anything and would let her suffer. The daughter said that to earn the money, she had to become an escort and make money for them. That news hit like a bomb, making the parents anxious. The father said he would never accept such shame because of his daughter. He raised his hand to teach her how to protect herself. Seeing the situation, the protagonist couldn't help but intervene. The man looked at the weak-looking young man, but the protagonist warned him not to interfere. He was just educating his own daughter. The protagonist observed that the father had no mercy, but the mother was clearly bothered by the situation. That's why he decided to use his control ability. This gave the mother the courage to put the girl's father in his place. She was angry about what they had done to their daughter and wouldn't let it happen again. The mother promised her daughter she would always take care of her. The father agreed to let the brother gather the money on his own. The protagonist thought about his sister. He knew everyone would do something for someone they love. The next day, at the train station, the young woman said goodbye to her departing parents. Her mother, at the train window, told her not to do anything stupid again. After they had left, the girl thanked the protagonist for accompanying her to the station. The young man hoped the new roommate's brother would be a responsible person. Playfully, she asked him to navigate her path with his charm. The protagonist, all shy, blushed, and when the cheeky girl got close and gave him a kiss on the cheek, things got even more awkward. She spoke softly in his ear, thanking him for saving her twice. After that situation, late at night, he was in a place where a large number of monster corpses were stored. The protagonist, dressed in his raven outfit, watched as a truck arrived. He decided to approach the truck, sneaking underneath it without being seen. The plan was to hide and gain access to the inner part of that warehouse. However, when he got under the truck, he realized he was also positioned close to a woman. She signaled for him to stay quiet. He noticed that she also wanted to infiltrate the manipulation center. With a limited space, their bodies were very close, causing some discomfort for the woman. Still very close to her body, he said it was a pleasure to meet her and that it was quite a coincidence. The young woman didn't think it was a coincidence. She believed she was just really unlucky for something like that to happen to her. Even so, she felt comfortable enough to introduce herself and mention which guild she belonged to. She warned that they were about to reach the delivery area, but she wouldn't be able to leave with him like that. That's when the protagonist told her to hold on to him tightly. Then the two of them jumped. After jumping, he protected her by landing on his back while she fell on top of him. Seeing that she took a moment to move away, he asked how much longer she planned to keep hugging him. Annoyed, she said she had no choice and that if she did, she wouldn't have hugged him. The two entered the monster manipulation area. She noticed that he was acting like someone who had never seen large-scale operations before, thinking he might be a rookie. Taking advantage of the situation, the protagonist said he was a novice and wanted her to take care of him. With that, she allowed him to follow her. Upon reaching a certain area, she mentioned that the boss wanted the fur of the white wolf. Handling the fur, she said it needed to be collected with great care. After that, she made a box appear and smiling, said her power was like an inventory bag. Then she called him to the next area where more bodies were stored. He took the ability of that white wolf for himself. A message notified him that the ability was ranked D and its name was mental deformation. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. They had been discovered. Immediately, someone appeared. The man who arrived was sweating and terrified, screaming that the monster had come back to life. The information caught both of them off guard, and the situation only got worse when, apparently, the man was engulfed by something that looked like a giant black snake. The red-haired young woman had no idea what that thing was. Trembling, she leaned slightly on the protagonist for support, but what seemed like black tentacles quickly wrapped around the young woman's waist, pulling her away. He called out to her and decided he had to use a power to save her. The red-haired young woman called the protagonist by the false name he had given her, pleading for his help. However, he noticed that the tentacles were fast, so he ran in that direction. He also thought about how the place had some high-quality metal materials. Touching a D-rank object, he activated his metal element transformation ability, creating his own tentacles. The protagonist, with his raven-clad form, launched the tentacles toward the young woman to defend her. Seeing that he had succeeded, one of his tentacles broke, causing the young woman to fall to the ground. He asked if she was okay. She said the tentacles were strong enough to tear parts of her clothes. The question now was how that thing had revived. The protagonist said they would only know if they took a closer look. However, several people were emerging from the tentacle-covered monster, screaming for help. The red-haired young woman could hardly believe what she was seeing. The sight of the monster was disturbing, and it continued to lash its tentacles toward them. Once again, the protagonist used metal element transformation to defend against the tentacles. He created a protective barrier like a shield to block the monster's attack. The red-haired young woman warned that the shield was getting smaller and urged him to think of something fast. As he remained silent, she fell into complete despair, believing she was about to become a snack for the tentacle monster. The protagonist, keeping his composure, remembered seeing some fuel tanks nearby. He tried to calm the young woman, telling her not to worry because he had a solution for everything and would protect her. Targeting the monster and its tentacles, he manipulated the metals. He directed them toward the fuel tanks, hurling them all at the tentacles. After that, he ignited the tanks to cause an explosion. He told everyone who had managed to free themselves from the tentacles to run. He barely had time to escape with her as the monster pursued them. Before they were caught, they were protected by someone who arrived wielding a large sword. The two were once again surprised when they saw that old man standing in front of them. The old man, who had the air of a vigilant, wanted to know if they were the thieves and where the revived monster was. The red-haired young woman lost her patience and wanted to know why that old man was talking so much nonsense. To him, that young woman was nothing more than a disrespectful girl, and his words only made the young woman even angrier. The protagonist knew exactly who that man was. Years ago, he was the one who sealed away a great mutant beast, and even there, when talking to the old man, he said he would deal with them after handling the monster. Despite his age, the man was still an A-rank hero, and his sword style was impressive. The protagonist expected nothing less from a technique passed down through generations, the northern sword ability. The old man remained agile among the large monster's tentacles, saving himself with his dimensional slashes. The tentacle-covered monster charged at the old man. That man's final attack seemed to unleash a storm of waves worthy of admiration. With great style, the old man managed to conclude a brief battle against the tentacled monster. After that, he stood in front of the pair, as now it was their turn. The young man tried to tell the old man that they weren't the ones who had revived the monster, but it was all in vain as the old man didn't believe a word they said, finding them suspicious. The red-haired young woman wanted to know if the guy in the vest could handle a fight against the old man. His response was clear. If he couldn't, she could take his place. The girl just wanted to hand over a cool piece of equipment. She handed over armor made from B-rank monsters and said it would be useful. When the protagonist saw that the young woman handed over the armor and took off, he noticed that she had the same personality as his sister. Meanwhile, the old man attempted to attack the protagonist, thinking he had his guard down. Naturally, the armor blocked the attack, proving to be very useful. As expected, the battle between them began. The protagonist wasted no time and activated Super Brain. Observing the old man's movements, he knew that this wouldn't be an easy fight, but after activating that power, his senses sharpened and the old man's attacks visibly slowed. The old man thought he had found an opening to strike. The protagonist realized he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Acting quickly, he used his control ability to try to escape. With that, he was able to temporarily cancel the attack. The old man noticed that just as he was about to strike, his movements had been stopped. Because of that, he took a few steps back. Meanwhile, the protagonist was thinking that if the attack had landed, he would have been in serious danger. Frustrated, the old man warned that thieves with cheap tricks could only get this far. With that, the masked protagonist decided to switch elements. That was the only only way he would have a chance to counterattack the old man. All the styles were strong, but control could at least restrict him a few times. The onlookers couldn't believe that the young man was capable of facing Duanshu Liu. Hearing the nearby comments, some speculated that he might be the hero god Spear and became curious about his true identity. The old man, judging the young man's movements, started to believe he wasn't a thief. Then he told everyone to leave the area, except for the young man, because he needed to talk to him. When he saw that the others weren't obeying, he reminded them that they should respect the central director's authority. The red-haired young woman, without thinking too much, ran off, telling the protagonist she would wait for him outside. The old man told the masked man that his sword skills were average, but his control over the metallic attribute was similar to that of God Spear. It wasn't surprising to the old man that the masked figure possessed multiple abilities. He knew the young man hadn't come there just to steal some monster fur, and asked if he wanted to learn the truth about the world. The protagonist considered what the man was saying. Then, without hesitation, he stated that he was there to uncover the truth. The old man let out a hearty laugh. Young people were truly fascinated by the unknown, and he thought it was fine to share the information. He began explaining that the main reason the Monster Manipulation Center opened the portal to the monster world was something called the White Cavity. Those words made the protagonist somewhat skeptical. The old man continued, saying that 15 years ago, the White Cavity in the city had been successfully opened. At that time, the Hero Association sent an elite team to the monster world. The old man proudly said that he was one of the heroes in that operation, and now, the Monster Manipulation Centers were constructing spatial weakness zones in the blue world. They only needed to keep burning energy, and they would have a chance to open the White Cavity once again. The protagonist, pointing at the revived monster on the ground, asked what it was. The old man explained that this happened simply because not everyone knew the details of monster mutations. The old man seemed tired, knowing that the humans of Earth were nothing more than cattle surrounded by monsters. Saying goodbye to the young man, he told him he could leave but should never forget that he was just a human. The supervisors of that company were upset because old Duan was already starting to cause problems. They knew he couldn't go around revealing plans to everyone, yet he still talked about it. One of them told the woman that even if the old man hadn't mentioned it, everyone would have found out eventually. There were already more than 25 seats in that room with voting power in the S-rank category. They discussed this while looking at a panel in the Hero Association's office in that city. The meeting to decide whether or not to contract White Cavity for other organizations would begin immediately. Elsewhere, the protagonist was visiting his sister, Fei Fei. Once again, he told her he had learned about a cruel reality. He thought about the previous night and his conversation with old Duan. He also knew he couldn't let outsiders find out about this. That's why that night he had to prevent the red-haired young woman from spreading his secret. When he asked her to look into his eyes, he used his control ability. He made her forget about the flame abilities and the metal element control, leaving her only with the memory that she had sold him an armor. After that, when he snapped his fingers, the young woman returned to normal without remembering what had happened. And since he had made her believe she had sold him an armor and still had money in her pockets, he had to run home. The protagonist recounted these things to his sister in the hospital, saying how much the young woman resembled her. He assured his sister that after he succeeded in his revenge, he would find a way to wake her up. After that, he returned home and started working on improving the metal element transformation. Using the suction star ring, he managed to create a medical unit. He would need this because he couldn't let others know about his abilities, and he planned to use it to deceive Liu Yuan. He produced masks for different occasions and abilities. He would use disguise transformation, and that disguise would be called Snake. And those abilities would be different from Yuji's. It would be the ability to unleash plasma bursts. He would be the masked man and create countless versions of himself to form a mysterious organization. He also had to consider the organization's recruitment fee, which would be paid by the young master Liu. When the protagonist arrived at the designated location, he found Liu lying on the ground, napping. Seeing this, the masked man gave him a few nudges with his foot to wake him up. Startled but happy, Liu immediately apologized for falling asleep while waiting. The masked man was pleased to see that the young man had shown up with confidence. Clinging to the protagonist's legs, the young man said he was willing to trade anything for an ability. The protagonist, pushing him away with his foot, said he didn't need anything like that. These things were easy to obtain. Then he ordered the young man to look directly into his eyes. Being clever, the protagonist used his power on the man. Then he asked for information about the blue pill. However, the young man said nothing, which unsettled the masked man, because when he had used control on others, they had revealed everything they knew. This led him to conclude that the young man might already have an ability, using his mental blast ability to check if he really had one. It seemed like he didn't, since he had been easily controlled before, but further investigation was needed. The protagonist placed his hand on him and activated ability theft. He was shocked. This young man who had been begging for an ability already had one, and it was A rank. However, it was a difficult ability to detect because it only activated when the person died, granting them a second life. To the protagonist, this ability was an excellent trump card, so he decided to keep it. From that moment on, he would treat the young man better for having acquired his ability. After that, he decided to grant him an ability he had taken from a monster's body at the manipulation center. Seconds later, he asked the young man to wake up. All he knew how to do was beg for an ability. The masked man told him that it was fine to sleep since he was tired, but asked him to pay attention to something. With that, he showed him an accessory called the suction star ring, which was made by the organization he belonged to. He explained that they used special methods to create genesis abilities, allowing even normal people to acquire powers. Half in disbelief, the young man caught the medicine that the masked man tossed to him. The order was to drink it without hesitation. His first thought was that it could be poison, but if that were the intent, he would have been eliminated on other occasions. Needing to gain an ability, he didn't hesitate and drank all the liquid in the vial. Right after that, intense pain began to take over his mind and body. Smiling, the masked man told the young man that he would soon experience the incredible sensation of possessing an ability. With the feeling of the ability coursing through his body, he started to feel feverish. The protagonist was controlling the innate ability hobby, making it activate. The young man thought it was just a reaction to the medicine he had taken and gradually began to transform, until he turned into a massive muscular white wolf. The masked man explained to him that this type of blood allowed for a bodily transformation ability into a werewolf. The young man with that ability didn't even have the power to transform into a dragon. Looking at his enormous palm, he wondered if he was stronger than his brother. The masked man quickly informed him that his brother was A rank, while he was merely E rank. He also told the young man not to be so impatient, as the organization could only provide an F rank medicine at best. The masked man thought that despite turning into a werewolf, the young man's eyes looked as cute as a husky's. He made it clear that only because of his good reputation within the organization, he was able to obtain an E rank medication for him. Liu realized that the organization had abilities of all ranks, meaning that one day he could surpass his father. The werewolf was so pleased that he started clinging to the masked man, trying to obtain an A rank ability. He insisted that the masked man at least let him treat him as a mentor. After that, he wanted to know what exactly the organization did. Sitting down, he listened as the masked man explained that the organization was called Judge and was created by a lord who had administrators. Liu, still in his white wolf form, wanted to know how he could become strong or even become the leader, considering how powerful the administrator was. The answer was simple and required no guessing, because the leader did not reveal himself easily. The massive white wolf kept pressing to know the fastest way to earn credits. His mission now was to use his identity as the young master of the Kunlun companies to gather information about the blue pill. It was explained to the young man that the blue pill enhanced abilities, which was why the masked man was in that city. Upon hearing that the pill strengthened abilities, the young white wolf was very pleased, only to have his hopes shattered when the masked man warned that heroes had already used the pill and harmed innocent people. That statement gave the young man a small wake-up call, making him just a little bit more aware. The young man was also curious to know which hero had made such a great mistake. His doubts were answered when the masked man revealed that it was an A-rank hero, Bing Chuan. Upon hearing the hero's name, Li Kenyang, who had already returned to his original form, was stunned. The masked man encouraged the young man, saying that after obtaining useful information, he would have another chance to improve his rank. And just as he was about to leave, he mentioned that he had forgotten to inform him of something. It was about the ability. It would only last for 1 week, the same amount of time he had to complete the mission. With this information, Liu was left speechless. After the meeting with young Liu, the protagonist continued sipping his drink. He saw a drawing of the masked man on a wanted poster, instructing people to contact Kuan Du Du. The shock was so great that he spit his drink all over a nearby waitress. He tore the poster down and kept examining it, unable to believe that the red-haired girl had done something like this. But he was also surprised to see that he was in the same place as her. He noticed that the girl was accompanied by 2 other people. Because of that, he decided to observe the situation more carefully. He realized that she was in the middle of a dispute with other individuals. One of the men wanted her to be more cooperative and hand over the sword to them. The girl played innocent, claiming she didn't know what they were talking about. Meanwhile, the men who looked like samurais were ordering her to tell the truth. The protagonist realized that a conflict was unfolding over a legendary weapon crafted from an S-rank monster. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl, who had no idea that the sword was actually valuable, seemed completely unfazed. Lying as much as possible, she insisted that they couldn't accuse her without any evidence. From a distance, the protagonist could tell that the girl wasn't even good at lying. The true owner of the sword, a black-haired woman, did not like what she was hearing. One of the samurais also lost his patience and decided to use the Santorio military style against the young woman. Another one, looking like a ninja, used the Shadow Jutsu clone style. The protagonist, watching from above, noticed that those 2 guys were ability users, both rank C. He also saw that his weak red-haired friend began to fight back using a B-rank weapon, the Weasel Scythe. She was so confident that she told them all to go to hell. The wind was initially terrifying. Trying to escape, she said she would never return the thing she had taken. The rightful owner of the sword didn't like hearing that, and using her A-rank ability, Snow Queen, decided it was time to unleash her power. The cunning redhead realized that this was no joke. As the protagonist watched, determined to help, he used his disguise transformation ability to put on his masked black cloak outfit. Meanwhile, the Ice Queen was chasing the redhead, launching multiple ice spears. The ability called Blizzard Storm was cast to prevent the redhead from escaping. The masked man watched, fearing for his red-haired friend, as she was in serious trouble. The commotion caused by these fighters made reporters start broadcasting the battle. Meanwhile, the redhead was having a tough time at the hands of the Ice Princess, who only wanted her to return what didn't belong to her. The red-haired girl, with a sarcastic tone, stopped in front of her and asked which knight she had lost, the gold one or the silver one. That made the A-rank hero girl extremely irritated. In response, she decided to freeze the insolent redhead's feet. She told her it would be best to apologize and return what didn't belong to her. Even as things got harder for the redhead, she continued acting defiantly. Smart as she was, she had already noticed the masked man's presence, so she threw a sacred sword in his direction. For the masked man, it was no surprise that she had already sensed him. He noticed that the sword was nothing more than a broken tool, and wondered who would even want such a thing. The redhead agreed at first, thinking the same thing, but later realized it was something valuable. The ice heroine didn't like finding out that the redhead had allies. She ordered her samurais to deal with that unexpected situation. They tried to attack the masked man with their weapons. Meanwhile, the protagonist noticed that the strange sword had spiritual energy and was draining his energy. He also realized that he could no longer control his own body. It seemed like the sword had taken over his movements. His strikes were so precise that they hit some of the ninja clones. However, seeing that they were just clones, the protagonist realized he was in a tight spot. One of the enemies charged at him from behind, but he turned around just in time to block the attack. The young woman, the owner of the demon blade Muramasa, noticed that the sword was acting differently. One of the ninjas pleaded for her help, but it was already too late. Their ability had been absorbed. It was a C-rank ability called Santorio. At that moment, he thought his mental energy would be completely drained, leaving him unable to hold on for much longer. Even so, the ice heroine kept launching her abilities at him. Things were getting so intense that the masked man considered using his rebirth ability. The abilities being used were on another level, and even normal people could sense that. The protagonist, looking up, saw that there was an air barrier, and the situation got worse when the fighters realized that the hero Wanderer Swordsman would also join the battle. Dragon arrived and immediately sided with the Sakura group, which believed their territory extended to Area 6. The ice heroine made it clear that she only wanted her belongings back and wouldn't back down from intimidation. The redhead quickly claimed that she had bought the sword from the ice heroine's master. The snow-powered girl was now worried. There were 2 more A-rank ability users in the area. Without hesitation, she launched her powers at the redhead, proving she wasn't afraid of anyone. As she did so, she looked at Dragon and said that if she got her belongings back, she would spare the red-haired girl's life. Dragon, however, never intended to let the ice heroine escape. He made it clear that Area 1 was not a place she could come and go as she pleased. She remained silent, observing. He told his companion that he would leave the ice heroine to him since he wanted to test the masked man's abilities. Dragon was warned not to go overboard, as the company was interested in recruiting the masked man. But Dragon's interest in the masked man was different. He just wanted to have some fun with his future little brother. As Dragon observed the fight, the redhead shouted in his ear, cheering on her masked brother. The young heroine with ice powers thought that, with everything in place, she would catch Dragon off guard, so she launched her barrage of ice spears, not expecting that the other hero would use the aura slash of his sword. Even seeing the sword coming toward her, she didn't move. As a result, she took the hit directly to the face. This left the red-haired girl quite shocked because she didn't shatter into pieces. The swordsman hero, realizing that it was just an illusion, ran off but knew she had to be nearby. In the midst of the confusion, the red-haired girl lost sight of her brother, Yuji, and started calling out for him. He was in a corner, waiting for his powers to return, as they were being drained by that sword. Things changed when he noticed that the sword was also made of a monster and realized he could take its ability. With this idea, he managed to absorb the sword's abilities. He transformed the abilities into 250 black cubes of obtained power. He thought he had gained several black cubes, but it was to be expected from an entire S-rank monster sword. The question was which ability he should upgrade since he needed enough power to face Demon Dragon. With precision, he decided to improve his B-rank metallic transformation ability. By upgrading it first, he turned it into an incredible A-rank ability, Control. With his new stance, he caught the attention of the ice heroine. Now the protagonist protagonist could sense reinforced concrete structures, cars, and airplanes. At last, he finally had enough power to fight against the experts. While feeling all that energy, the ice-powered girl thought she could catch him off guard. With just one movement, he dissipated her power. He transformed her power into a giant propeller, returning to her the momentum of the power she had launched at him. An A-rank heroine never thought someone so insignificant could be troublesome. Meanwhile, the masked man continued manipulating the giant propeller, and he astonished those watching. Not only that, but he also subdued the intruder with metallic tentacles. He told her not to move because he usually treated women kindly, and when he pointed his hand toward her heart, he managed to absorb her power, now possessing the A-rank ability Orb Snow Queen. The protagonist was surprised, as he thought it was an elemental type rather than a summoning ability. The young woman who had her power taken was now just an ordinary girl. The swordsman hero didn't understand why the masked man was dealing with some random girl. Demon Dragon didn't understand why he was with some random girl. The protagonist clarified that she wasn't just any girl, she was the Snow Queen. Demon Dragon was annoyed upon hearing the protagonist say he had an A-rank ability. Seizing the opportunity, the protagonist challenged either of them to a fight. If they refused, they would have to team up and attack him together. Everything was set to be broadcast live, and the news was about the upcoming 2v1 battle. The comment section was exploding during the broadcast. Everyone wanted to see if the 2v1 fight would actually happen. Dragon was sharp and knew that falling for provocations in front of the audience wouldn't be good for his reputation. It was a shame because a fight between them could have been quite exciting. Demon Dragon advised his friend, saying he should understand his opponent before starting the fight. With the same sharpness, he noticed the ring on the masked man's hand. That way, he could be sure if that man truly had enough skill to defeat Snow Queen. Before anything else, he warned the masked man that if he managed to defeat him, then they would definitely launch their attack. But the protagonist wasn't interested in talking and immediately launched the first attack. The swordsman wasn't playing around either and decided to block the power with his sword. But the real surprise was the ability that followed after the ice. This confused the spectators and created an opening for the masked man to attack. Fortunately, the swordsman blocked an attack that could have been troublesome. He barely avoided getting hit, but he noticed that the masked man was trying to control the sword. Seeing that his attempt at control was useless, the protagonist stepped back a few paces. He raised a barrier to buy time and change his strategy. He needed to evolve an ability to A-rank to defeat Wanderer Swordsman. With both abilities, Snow Queen and Control in hand, he managed to fuse them. He transformed Control into an A-rank ability, making him a natural dominator, although that wasn't exactly his plan for that ability. Impatient spectators questioned what he was doing, and if he had already given up on the fight. The protagonist told them not to be so hasty and to wait a little, and then he launched the mind control attack. The swordsman immediately saw the image of his older sister before him. When he saw his sister's image in front of him, he became destabilized. Hesitant, he attacked the masked man. Sweating, he wondered what kind of mental user he was to possess a dual ability, but for him, it was already too late. Even he hadn't expected the hero to have such a weakness. Visibly discouraged, he refused to attack the image of his older sister, who had already passed away. The spectators at the scene couldn't believe what they were seeing. They wanted the hero Wanderer Swordsman to have been defeated. The commentators questioned why the hero was still dazed and standing in the same position. Everyone knew that hero was always alert and cautious about a possible mental ability. Meanwhile, the nearby redhead was rooting for the masked man because she needed to get the money he owed her. Hearing that, the protagonist could hardly believe he was being scolded at a moment like that. Seeing that the hero had been defeated, Dragon commented that he had done a good job forcing him to reveal his trump card. His friend's advice was not to look into the masked man's eyes, as that ability was difficult to counter. When Demon Dragon finally decided to attack, the masked man was already waiting for him. For the red-haired, horned hero, the fight had many meanings, and he found it interesting to make a bet. The masked man did not oppose it and asked what he would like to wager. Without wasting time, Demon Dragon stated that if he lost, he would have to reveal the secret of the artifact he was using. The protagonist liked that because, fortunately, Demon Dragon wasn't too careless and had noticed the suction star. Determined, Dragon charged in for the first strike, making his presence immediately known. However, the protagonist also already had his defense plan, but the enemy was truly fast and was already setting up a counterattack. He struck the protagonist fiercely in the back. With that blow, he was sent flying. Because of this, the commentators went wild, unable to understand what was happening to the man in the black cape. All that could be seen now was the protagonist being thrown. Dragon didn't care if that man was a dual ability user. He thought he was nothing compared to his own powers. The blow the masked man took was direct, causing some damage. This made him have a coughing fit beneath his mask. Looking at Demon Dragon, he thought that guy was extremely fast and had powerful attack strength. Dragon, seeing that the masked man was still standing, figured his bones must be really tough. The masked man's next attack was Control. Dragon, struck by that power, began hallucinating about his younger brother. He refused to believe that the masked man had been arrogant enough to transform into his little brother. His fury was so intense that he managed to achieve the transformation into the Black Flame Earth Dragon. The protagonist found it odd. The spell had backfired. The commentators were ecstatic because they could now witness Demon Dragon's second transformation. He charged at the protagonist to attack. However, the masked man was already prepared for the counterattack. In the form of a whirlwind, he asked if he really thought he could pierce him with sharp metal. The protagonist found it interesting that the enemy was transforming into a drill and was also curious to see if he could withstand the next attack. With that, he pulled out a large chunk of nearby metal and began floating on it. Even so, Dragon declared that the protagonist would not escape him. However, when he was attacked, Dragon reverted to his original form. While being immobilized, he asked if the masked man had already forgotten about the black flames he possessed. He struggled, trying to use his black flames to break free. The commentators believed the metal wouldn't last long against Dragon's black flames. Hearing all this up close, the redhead couldn't hold back and scolded that commentator who didn't know what he was talking about. While Dragon attempted to melt the steel ropes holding him, the protagonist knew that even if the fire resistance of rank B wasn't very high, it would at least hold up on the first attempt. With that, using his magnetism, he pulled cars, poles, and other metals toward Dragon, creating a massive metallic cube. He called that attack Titan Fist. Everyone nearby tried to keep their distance to avoid being caught in it. At that moment, Dragon feared for his life. Now that the smoke had cleared, everyone would see Demon Dragon's condition. Amid the comments, someone managed to spot Flamer Butterfly. The red-haired heroine didn't seem to be acting normal. Her companion, an older hero, asked her to leave the area. Looking from above, he decided he would handle the situation. With his power, he held up the massive metal box. When the spectators saw that a hero of rank GXC Zhang had appeared, their hopes were renewed. Because of that hero, the other two were now safe. The swordsman hero used an air barrier. Even so, they barely survived. Beach, the eldest, thought it was good that both of them were still alive. Flame Butterfly asked if they needed her help. The swordsman hero asked them to take care of Demon Dragon. After the chaos had settled, the protagonist was in the apartment with some medicine. Running into those three had been quite tense for him. However, his main goal was to focus on the blue pill, and the two people who knew about this were the hero being Chuan and Sour Spicy. The protagonist knew that he might face more problems in the future, and that it was no longer convenient to share the apartment. When his roommate arrived, he nearly died of fright. She wanted to know tell what kind of medicinal smell was filling the entire room. She looked around a lot, as if suspecting something. It was great that they had returned because he needed to talk to them about something. Out of nowhere, he bluntly stated that he would have to move out and leave them. The news hit like a bomb. He explained that it wasn't appropriate for a man to live with 3 women. One of them asked if he didn't care about Naixui. He said there was nothing going on between them. The girls came to a consensus. Since that was the case, they had no reason to stop him from leaving. Trying to ease the situation, he said he would take them out for a meal that day. But all he heard was a door slamming shut, as one of the girls was deeply disappointed. The protagonist didn't know if he had said something wrong. The protagonist said that if they were going out, it would be best if they all went together. Shoei asked why he was treating Naixui that way and called him a jerk. They said they would take a nap and would only eat together after he talked to Naixui. The protagonist told himself that he couldn't say he had no feelings for her, but he didn't want to put her in danger. He knocked on the bedroom door, and soon she said it was open. Upon entering, he saw that she was lying on the bed, looking upset. Quickly, he apologized, but the young woman was deeply hurt. Crying, she asked if he despised her past. Before he could answer, she bombarded him with questions. Trying to calm Naixui, he placed his hands on her shoulders. He thought that the love she felt was because of her family, and that she had decided to entrust this feeling to someone else. And because of his response, she interpreted it negatively, as if it was her past's fault. He said she was like a porcelain doll. If touched by the one she loves, she cracks easily. He wondered how he could be so cruel. When he tried to take back his words, she said he was right, and that she was rushing things. She thought that after their hug, they would already be in love. She said it wasn't the right time yet, but she didn't want to be forgotten and asked if he could be her future boyfriend. Sighing, he said he would accept. Later that night, in another house, Bing Chuan, lying on a couch, asked for more drinks. Liu Yuan, standing behind a wall, looked at him and thought that if it weren't for the mission, he would never spend so much money on him. Taking advantage of the fact that he was asleep, he approached and searched through his clothes. After searching for a while, he found a strange box. But just at that moment, Bing Chuan woke up and asked what he was doing. Covering up, he said he was looking for a lighter. Without suspecting anything, Bing Chuan asked where the girls were. Liu Yuan quickly said that they were waiting for him and that he should choose one, as she would serve him. Seizing the opportunity, he rummaged through Bing's belongings to find something. Finally, he found what he was looking for. He smelled what was inside the box and realized that the scent made him crave it intensely. But a thought snapped him out of the trance. That could be the blue pill. But out of nowhere, he heard a scream. The calmness of his thoughts was shattered by a noise coming from the room where the hero was. In the time it took to grab a square piece from inside the box, he only thought about hiding it and quickly put it in his pocket. Worried about the noise he had heard, he went to check if Lin Qinyang would open the door and explain what was happening. However, when the door opened, the two stood there in silent tension. Curious, the young hare looked into the room and was shocked by what he saw. Breaking into a cold sweat, he looked at the hero and asked if that woman was all ready. Calmly, the hero confirmed it. Trying to keep his composure, the hare said everything was fine and that the hero could go ahead as he would look for the people from the company. The hero, still concerned, left the mess for the young hare to handle. Anxious, he thought about what that man might do if he discovered the theft. Meanwhile, down in the parking lot, the hero was furious for having failed once again, apparently upset for not being able to feel emotions after consuming the blue pill. He was so furious about not being able to control his own powers that made it difficult for him to have fun. However, looking at his box, he noticed something was missing. His anger was so great that he didn't care, thinking that one more or less wouldn't make a difference. Well known, he sped away in his sports car. After spending some time elsewhere, the protagonist was being stopped by his friend, who couldn't stand the idea of him moving away. The protagonist said that sharing an apartment with women was an illusion because it was very uncomfortable. The sharp-witted friend thought that discomfort was where the real benefit lay. This made his friend think he was a bit unconventional at times. Upon arriving at the address, the chubby friend wondered where he had gotten so much money, because the house was stunning. After finishing the move, the protagonist was finally alone and found it a bit lonely. He thought that ever since he faced Demon Dragon, he hadn't had time to use his summoning ability, Show Queen. He considered that even after removing parts to upgrade his control ability, something was still missing. So he raised his hands and commanded the summon to appear. Gradually, he saw red elf-like features looking at him. At first, he was startled because a Lule had emerged. However, it was just a small, cute elf with a sweet appearance. The little one's ice powers made everything around freeze, and he felt extremely cold. The little one, in turn, wanted to get closer to him. He stepped back and asked her not to come any closer, but the tiny elf didn't want him to worry. Hearing her say that the cold around them would lessen just a little, he still disagreed. So the protagonist decided to use the fire element to warm himself up. The little Xiao Xu found the fire very beautiful to look at and moved closer. Her face grew happier and happier as she felt the warmth of the fire. The protagonist thought the ice effect must be passive, because if it weren't, even the fire element wouldn't be able to resist. With half-open eyes, the little one thought that her master's body must also be warm. He kept retreating further and further away from her, but when he noticed she had fallen asleep on his knee, he felt pity. He grabbed a blanket, trying to warm her up. However, he only did that because she was small and cute, but it would only be this once. Morning came, and finally, it was time for the fan meeting of the hero Sar Spicy. Amidst a crowd of crazed fans going wild over the hero, the protagonist was there in the middle, pretending to be a lunatic fan, the kind that screams and jumps up and down in the crowd. Then, a woman announced that the hero would be ready in just a few moments. She also asked if everyone was ready to scream as loud as they could. However, everyone was already screaming like maniacs. Confetti rained down from above, falling over the hero and his followers. For that crowd, it was as if he were the glorious hero of all. Playing his part, the protagonist wanted to stand out among all the fans, and when he was pushed, he took advantage of the situation to get noticed. With that, the hero caught the fan in his arms, showing that he was a true hero. The protagonist wasted no time and pretended to be extremely excited. He quickly went for a firm handshake and introduced himself, all to install one of his orbs on the hero. Looking into the hero's eyes, he said he was his #1 fan. Gradually, the crowd began to disperse. When it was all over, he was satisfied that everything had come to an end. Disgusted by having touched so many filthy hands, he wanted to take a nap right there in the car since later that night he still had to participate in a special program. The secretary agreed with him, saying the best option was to rest in peace. If he could actually manage to do that in the car, he replied that even if he couldn't, he would have to because it was necessary. He knew that all the money he earned was like a bottomless pit. He always needed to make more. He wanted to gamble once again, but knew he couldn't keep doing that. He was startled when suddenly someone approached from behind and asked if living that way was exhausting. Breaking into a cold sweat, he turned around to see who it was, and he immediately recognized the masked face of Yuji, the one everyone was talking about. The masked man told him not to be so scared. He just wanted to ask a few questions. Questions about why he was in the same company as Demon Dragon. The protagonist quickly used his control ability on that person. With that, the hero was paralyzed, and the protagonist realized that he was inside the mental world of the hero Sar Spicy. He began rummaging through his memories and looking through various windows with some expectation. Some displayed past events, while others showed moments from the present. He found a blurry-faced figure holding a blue pill that immediately caught his attention. He searched for more more conversations between the two. You can find several moments when the two of them stayed in contact. That hero did it for pills. It was an agreement. He provided information, and in exchange, a man gave him some blue pills. He would talk about the heroes from his company and their weaknesses. For that man with the emblematic face to be able to act, the protagonist knew that they had met more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times, perhaps even 4. Recently, the two met again, and the man with the emblematic face wanted to know about the masked man. The hero didn't know anything about this person since he wasn't from the same company. However, the man wanted answers, and only then would he give him more pills. He saw memories unfolding in a parking lot where luxurious cars were gathered. That emblematic man wanted to know about the secret abilities of that hero. For that, he handed over a certain number of blue pills. For that hero,